All right, section 9-4, greatest common factor. And you'll hear me refer to that as the GCF, greatest common factor. You may have heard that called greatest common divisor at some point in life. Not necessarily any different. It's actually the exact same thing. So if you hear greatest common divisor, or if you Google greatest common factor and it comes back greatest common divisor, that means the same thing. They're exactly the same thing. Okay. So greatest common factor is the main vehicle or the main muscle between factoring polynomials. So we're going to take the things that we multiplied together and added together and did all that stuff with the last couple of weeks. We're going to undo that by factoring them. So we're going to start with what we got as answers and go backwards and get the factors that go with that. So what it means to be a factor is a part of a multiplication problem. That's all a factor is. It's part of a multiplication problem. Nothing more than that. Okay. So when we're looking for the greatest common factor, we're going to do, I want you to think reverse distributive property. Okay, that's what we want to think about when we're doing this. Okay. All right. So there's a couple of things that we want to make sure of before we factor in any way. The first thing we want to make sure is the polynomial is in descending order. And remember, we were writing our answers the last couple of weeks. We would say write it from greatest exponent down to the least, greatest to least. That's what I mean by descending order, greatest to least in exponents. Okay, so make sure it's in descending order first, and then you'll find the GCF. Okay, that's where we're at today. There's a few more steps we'll get to later on this week and into next week, what we can do to factor things further, but we're just looking at GCF today. That's the only thing we're doing today. So let's start with an example. So we want to factor using greatest common factor. Example A, 3x plus 9. Let's start with something really, really easy. Okay. So when we look at this, we look at the exponent on the variable. What's the exponent on x here? 1. There's nothing written there, so it's a 1. And then we look at it and say, okay, well, is that in order from biggest to smallest? X is the first, no x's. That would be in order. That's in the right order, okay? So it's in descending order. The next thing we do is we look for 3, or what number do 3 and 9 have in common? Or what numbers do they have in common? 3 goes into itself and 3 goes into 9. Is there anything bigger? No. So 3 is the biggest number they have in common. Do they have a variable in common? Yeah, this one has an x, this one does not. So they don't have a variable in common. So the GCF is 3. So we're going to put that out to the front of the parentheses. And then what we have to say is, okay, what times 3 would give me 3x? X. That's going to go right there. What times 3 would give me a positive 9? A positive 3. We factored this. This is the factored form. You stop right there. That's all you're doing today. We're going to get to there. We'll get to all that. Man. All right, let's look at another one. Let's say it's 4x minus 12. Is that in the right order? Yeah, we got x's in the front, no x's in the back. Then we look at 4x and 12. What do they have in common? 3 goes into 12, but it doesn't go into 4. 2 goes into 4. Does 2 go into 12? Yeah. Is there anything bigger than 2? 4 goes into itself and 4 goes into 12. That's bigger than 2. So we're looking for the greatest common factor. So you pick the biggest one. 4 is the biggest one that goes into both of them. So our GCF is 4. What would be left in the parentheses? X minus 3. Good job. So if we just see what I mean by reverse distributed property, that if we just distributed our answer, we'd get the original back. That's how you can check, do your distributed property, and it'll get you the original problem back. Let's look at another one. Let's say we had 8x squared plus 12x. Similar problem. A little different on this one. Not much different. Is that in the right order? I got x squared first and then plain x, so that's biggest to smallest. Now, what do the 8 and the 12 have in common? 4 goes into 8 twice and into 12 3 times, so that goes evenly. Is there anything bigger that goes into 8 that could go into 12? 8 goes into itself, but not into 12. So 4 is the biggest number. What letter do they share? How many? Well, there's how many on this term? There's 2. There's how many on this one? 1. So they only share 1. Okay? You can never share what you don't have, right? So this one has 2, this one has 1. The common is 1. So our GCF then is going to be 4x in this case, because they had an x in common. What times 4x gets me 2, or it gets me 8x squared? 2x. We need another x to get the x squared, plus what? 3. No x on that 3? No. If we redistribute, we get the original back. Say we had 24x squared plus 16x cubed. We'll look at that in just a little bit. Yeah, it does happen. All right, so let's look at this one. Is it in the right order? No. So how do we rearrange it? Yeah, just move it around. So it's the biggest in the front and go down from there. I'm going to get in the habit of rewriting our problems that way, especially if we're going to factor. Now, 16x cubed and 24x squared, what do they have in common? 8 goes into 16, 8 goes into 24. What else do they have in common? 8's the biggest number that goes into both of them. How many x's are here? 3. How many are here? 2. So they could share how many? 2. There's only 2 that could pair up, right? So the x on the greatest common factor is going to be x squared for the 2 that they could pair up. What's that going to leave in parentheses? 2x plus 3 again. Because 8 times 2 is 16. X squared times x is x cubed. 8 times 3 is 24. X squared times 24 is got the x squared on it. We've factored that with the GCF. Kind of go toward what Tyler was asking about. 7x to the third minus 22x squared. Is that in the right order? Got x cubed in the front, x squared after that. That's biggest to smallest. That's the way we want it. Now, do 7 and 22 have anything in common? No. Other than what? 1. Factoring out a 1 doesn't really help us much. What do they have in common? How many x's? Yeah. First one's got 3. The second one's got 2. But there's 2 that pair up. So it's got 2 x's in common. So our GCF is going to be x squared. Technically, it's 1x squared because 1 is the factor for the numbers. But what's that leave in parentheses here? 7x minus 22. So your GCF here, we didn't have a number that they had in common, but we had letters that they had in common. That can happen. Say we had 15x to the 4th minus 20x. We want to find is that in the right order? Yeah, we got x to the 4th first, and then we're going down from there to plain x. Still biggest to smallest. What's the GCF? 15 and 20 have 5 in common. How many x's do they have in common? 1 x in common. What's that going to leave in parentheses? There you go. Good job. 3x cubed minus 4. Negative 32x cubed plus 24x to the 5th. Negative 32x to the 3rd plus 24x to the 5th.
Rearrange.
Rearrange. Why?
Because 24 is
yeah, the exponent on the 24 is bigger. So 24x to the 5th, then what? Minus 32x cubed. Be careful when you have to rearrange that you get the signs right. Don't just move them and keep the signs in the same place. This is a positive. When it goes to the front, this is a negative. It becomes minus. Now, GCF of that. 24 is divisible by 8. X to the 3rd, 3 x's in common. What's left in the parentheses? 3 x squared. So you took 3 of them out of that, so there's 2 left. So that's why it's x squared minus 4. Good job. Pretty easy so far. Doesn't get much harder than this in this section. Let's say we had 6x cubed plus 3x minus 5x squared. Rearrange. What goes first? Okay. Now there's 3 terms now, but we're still looking for the greatest common factor, but we're looking for it for all 3 terms, not just 2 of them. It's a little bit more complicated, but it's still the same idea. We look at the numbers 6, 5, and 3. Do they have anything in common? No. 6 and 3 do. The 5 messes it up. Now, what do they all share? 1 what? 1 x. So we're going to pull an x out. What's left in the parentheses? Good job. And we factored out the greatest common factor of h. 3 terms. If there were 17 terms, you'd do the same idea. It just gets longer. 3 terms is about as long as they get in our particular course. But let's say we had 28x squared minus 21x to the 4th plus 14x cubed. Rearrange. What comes first? Okay. So it gets it in descending order. That's the main first thing we got to do. All right. 21 and 14 and 28 all divisible by 7. How many x's they got in common? 2. 4, 3, and 2. All they can match up is 2. Here's what I want you to do. Anytime that number in the front, when you get it in descending order, if the number in front is negative, when you pull that GCF out, pull the negative with it. So it's 7x to the second, but we're going to make it negative 7x to the second. That's going to be helpful when we go to the next step in the next couple of days. Okay. So anytime that number in the front is negative, when you pull your GCF out, pull a negative out. So what's that going to do with all the signs of what's left inside? Change them. Okay. So this goes from a negative to a positive what? 3x squared. And then that becomes negative 2x. And then this becomes negative 4. And no x's on that one. And we factored out the GCF. Okay. Say we had negative 42x to the 4th plus 24 minus 48x squared. Rearrange. So what comes first? Negative 42x to the 4th minus 48x squared plus 24. All right. 6 goes into 42, 6 goes into 48, 6 goes into 24. Is that the biggest thing that goes into all 3 of them? That seems like a small number for these larger numbers here. 12 goes into 48, 12 goes into 24, but 12 doesn't go into 42. So we know it's not 12. What other things go into 24? 8 does. Does 8? 6, we've already said 6. We're trying to find if there's anything bigger. So we're looking for the bigger numbers that go into the smallest one. So 8 goes into 24, 8 goes into 48. Does 8 go into 42? No, so 8's out. 12's out, 8's out. Yeah, 7 doesn't work for the 42 because it doesn't go into 24 or 48. So I think 6 is the right number. What do we pull out? Negative 6. Why do we pull a negative on this one and we don't always do that? Yeah, that guy right there is negative. So when you pull out the GCF, you're going to pull out a negative 6. Do we have any x's in common? Heard a no and heard a yes. Defend your position. Why yes? To be a common factor, you've got to be on all of them. So this has got x's, but that one doesn't have any. So we can't have any x's in common because this guy doesn't have any to share. So there'd be no x's in there. So negative 6 is the only thing for the GCF. So what's left in the parentheses? 7 x to the 4th. plus minus 4. Good job. Guys, it really doesn't get any more complicated than this. It really is this easy, okay? So, we're going to do a handout for practice today.